안녕하세요, kimincoree 박키미입니다. Hi, this is Kimi Park from kimincoree, and today we're talking about the Sejong Institute. So we're gonna start by a rough presentation, then I'm gonna talk to you about my experience, what was good, what was bad, and I'm gonna finish with some tips to pass these exams if you are intending to study there. The Sejong Hakdang, the Sejong Institute, is a Korean language institute created by the South Korean government in 2007. They have 234 institutions established all around the world in 80 plus countries. So they might be one next to you. Although I don't know why I assume that because I have no idea where you are watching this from. Moving on. It was named after King Sejong the Great. If you know any, rulers of Korea or historical ruler of Korea, that's going to be the one that you know. King Sejong the Great is very famous for having invented Hangul, which is the Korean alphabet, because before that they used to use Chinese characters, which was complex and not very accessible for the majority of the population. The Chinese characters, which are called hanja, are still at the basis of a lot of Korean vocabulary. To show you how useful it is in the creation of a word, if you take the very name of the institute, you have Sejong, which is the name of the king, and then you have Hakdang, which means an institution, and Hak as a syllable comes from the hanja hak, which means to learn, which you might find in an easy word like hakyo, which means school. And you have tang, which is whole, which you might also have in another easy word like shiktang, shik being food and tang being a whole, food hall, a restaurant. And so you have a whole to learn, so that's an institute. Moving on, I'm gonna tell you about my experience at the Sejong Institute. I have studied there for over 3 years. I've taken 12 classes, both in the Institute of Berlin and the Institute of Paris. The classes are usually about 2.5 hours long, once or twice a week, depending the courses, depending the institution, usually in the evenings and or Saturday mornings. A normal semester, so like a course duration, is about 15 weeks. So usually you have about 14 chapters per book that you're gonna study. You have this plus the exam week. Sometimes you have 16 weeks where you have an extra week for Hoksuk, which is a revision week. The main thing that I'm going to tell you about later is the Sejong normal curriculum. I'm going to come back to this in a second. But they also have other courses. For example, we have here the Sejong Hanguk Munhwa. So Sejong, you know the name. Then Hanguk is Korean, and then Munhwa is culture. So this is the Korean culture, level 1. So that was normally available for people having passed the normal curriculum level 2 onwards. Although I was able to enter after having just finished level 1 because I asked the teacher. But to be honest, I was a little bit I was completely lost during the class because the whole class was in Korean. My level was a lot lower than the other students, but still, it's a fun course. So you learn, all the basics about Korean culture, like the money, the history a little bit, the etiquette, the architecture, the different places, how the subway works. There's really quite a I'm doing this, but you can't see anything, can you? So the food, of course the food. You also have in this book all the translations. Yeah, it's pretty broad cultural thing, so if you've been interested in Korea for a long time, you're not gonna learn so much there, but it's just kind of fun, and then you learn the related vocabulary if you didn't know it. But my favorite thing about this class was that we actually done a few activities. We did this. This is a rami broom, which is more of a decorative item, like you can, hang that on your wall, or you can, brush your desk, I don't know. It's cute, and we made that in class all together. We've also been to a Korean restaurant together, or we've been in Berlin. There's the Garten der Welt, where there's gardens of a whole lot of different countries, and there is a Korean garden, so we went there. That was quite nice. Huehwa is the Korean conversation course. I would really recommend anybody to do this one because it's more activity based than the normal curriculum. So this one is a little bit more fun. The book is also a little bit better in the Berlin Institute. Normally you have to follow first these courses. When you've done level 1 and 2 of the normal curriculum, you can do the conversation level 1. When you've done level 3 and 4, you can do level 2. And when you've done 5 and 6, you can do level 3. And then 7 and 8, you can do level 4. Because this is a bit of a revision class where the grammar is the one you've seen in the 2 previous normal courses, but it's a lot more based on getting you to speak. So there's a lot of partner works. I know that in the classes I've done in Paris, it was the only book that they were using. So they were going from there and then taking the grammar point and then just studying that one from there. They were not doing the whole thing with the dialogues and all of that you have in here. The German format of having to do these 2 and then doing a revision course was actually quite good because it would force you to study it again before moving on, or even at the same time as moving on a level already here. The Yohang is travel. In Paris, I know that they were doing the travel course for beginner. This book is actually quite good. You can find it on the website of the Sejong Institute as an ebook just to look at it. It's really well done. Follow like a girl who's going to visit a friend in Korea. So it starts from in the plane, you arrive at the airport, and you arrive at your hotel, and a note on how the toilets are different, and order food in a restaurant, and then shopping, to concerts, seeing some traditional things. There's loads of cultural notes, going to a sport event, norebang, all of this. I would really recommend having a look at this if you're planning to go to Korea anytime soon, just to have a good overview and some simple sentences. The one thing is that you have the Korean sentence and then you have the English translation under, but you don't have any romanization, so you would need to know your Hangul before, which is a good thing because you shouldn't be relying on the romanization because it's very confusing. If you actually intend to learn Korean, just skip that part. I know I was also like, oh my god, like when I heard it for the first time, because I was like, how am I ever gonna manage? But actually it's really not that hard. So let's go back to the normal curriculum. So you have 8 levels. This is the book of level 5, for example. So you have level 1, 2, 3, 4, which is Chokup, which is the beginner level, and then you have 5, 6, 7, 8, which is Jungkup, which is the intermediate level. I'm currently doing the level 8. Let me tell you what is good and what is bad about studying at the Sejong Institute, starting with the good. It is cheap. It is really cheap. It is the cheapest you can find anywhere. I think, as far as I've looked, it was true. Because they are, I think, subsidized by the Korean government. In Berlin, for the past 3 years, it was 50 euro per class. Now, as of 2022, they've raised it to 80 euros. In London, it's 100 pounds, but that includes the book. The book itself is about 25 euros. So in Berlin, you also have to buy your own book. And in Paris, the classes are free, but they have this sort of like weird system. It's not the first come, first serve basis. You register, and then there's gonna be a lottery, which I find to be a little bit of a strange system, but yeah, why not? But little tip, you can find some of the book, not so much this one, but the conversation course and the travel course, you can actually find them for free on the website of the institute. You also have just loads of resources in general about learning Korean, about Korean culture, and it's not just in English. There's a lot of apps which you can practice the content of their books. Honestly, this is really a lot of free content that is well made. It's worth having a look. Another good point is the scholarship. In Berlin, and I assume it in some other of the institute, if you come first of your class of each level, I got that when I was level 1, for example. I got the best grade in the class. I also did not miss a class, and my grade was above 80%. I think that's the mark. Then I could get a scholarship for the following quarter, Sejong 2. I didn't pay the class, and I also got the book for free, so I didn't have to pay for anything. Pretty good. I got it twice in a row, so yeah, there is a spring speaking competition that they have in all the Sejong Hakdang in the world. You have 2 topics and you need to speak in front of a public at a given date. That was how it was the first year. I've done it the first year when I was level 1. Well, after it was just recording a video because of, COVID, and all the institute were actually closed and everything was offline. And the grand prize of each institute is to be sent to Korea for free. All of the winner get to meet in Korea for this sort of big event. I think it's like a few days or a week where they do cultural events, and they also maybe even do speeches there again or something. I don't know. I haven't won this because I won when I was level 1. I won because I was the only one to take part in sort of level 1, and then they had put level 1 on one side, because obviously if you're level 1 and you're competing against somebody on level 5 or 6 or 7, who are usually the people who win, it's just not really fair. So the level 1 had its own category, and because I was the only one, I just automatically won, even though I actually had a little bit of a breakdown and was not able to speak so well. So I got some goodies and a scholarship. I got a scholarship yet again. I took 3 courses for free in total in my whole Sejong career. I don't know how to call this curriculum, probably. I never had a bad experience. Of course, there's some teachers you get along better than some other. The teachers are really nice. Like I had this one teacher who gave a little present to everybody who had not missed the class. It was just like a cute little washi tape thingy, but that was cute. Or another of the teacher came at the end of semester to Korean restaurants, so the teachers are good. And I have to be honest, since it's been online for the past 2 years, it's not great, and you don't really get to know either your classmates or teacher on a personal level. But it also allows people who are not in the given city to study. So right now I study at the Berlin Institute, but a lot of the students are actually not from Berlin. So we have people in the rest of Germany, and you even have people from other countries. Now let's talk about what was bad at the Sejong Institute. What was bad is the book. I mean, it's not bad, but I'm not very keen on the book. And it's not necessarily the content, but just the layout. Hear me out. You have a chapter, right? Sort of like introduction page. And then you have usually dialogue 1, vocabulary, grammar point 1, exercise about the grammar point. Then dialogue 2, vocabulary, grammar point number 2, exercise about this grammar point, hearing practice, speaking practice, and reading with questions. And that's it. And then we are at the next one. So if you look here and for all the dialogues and everything, it's very plain, and even though there is like different characters, like they're coming all the time, like Tien and Lola, and I don't remember them. I don't remember them because I don't have a visual for any of them. And I'm saying that in comparison to, for example, Easy to Learn Korean. Okay, here you have a dialogue. You have an illustration of the context, and because you see those characters again and again, you have a presentation of the character at the beginning. Here you get to know the different characters, and I just find it a little bit better and a little bit easier, and then you care a little bit more about what's happening because you're following the stories through the book, which is also the case. The Yonsei, you have the introduction page, a dialogue with the situation. Then the vocabulary actually has loads of pictures, and even in the exercise you have loads of illustrations, the grammar points and the exercise for each grammar point. And I find that to be a lot better and a lot more engaging. You get to know the characters and who they are and what they want. It's a lot more colorful as well. I mean, it doesn't need necessarily to have the colors, but it does help. In terms of layout of a book, Yonsei would definitely be my favorite out of the 3. I would have to say that this one is the older version of the book. It has been updated in 2019. 90% of the content is actually exactly the same, and the layout hasn't changed, because the layout is the one thing I don't particularly like. That's what I would say about it. Grammar points are a bit short in the book, which is the case for most books. But even I find that in the explanation that we get from the teachers, and it can change from teacher to teacher, but in general, they are quite short. They explain it. Moving on, we do straight the exercise. We don't have a lot of time. Whereas like in Yonsei, for example, they would give us more of like the common mistake or comparison with like this grammar point that's very similar. Sometimes, again, it depends on teacher, but generally speaking, I found throughout my time at Sejong that it was a little bit lacking in details, especially when you come up to the more intermediate levels where the grammar point that you're studying are really more complex than at the beginning. So I study the grammar point in class, then after class I go and check for more information. Usually I listen to a Talk to Me in Korean podcast about the same grammar point, or I checked How to Study Korean, or there is this series of books which are really good called Korean Grammar News, which is very detailed. So usually I check these to see if there is any additional information I can add to what has been said in class. Also, from a certain level and as early as possible, they will explain everything in Korean, so sometimes you didn't really properly get it, so it's nice to have the explanation as well in English or in your native language. Google the grammar point in Korean and put grammar behind it, and usually you'll find some explanation. That's usually what I do. Then the classes are quite short, especially going up levels, so you end up having to do a lot of the extra work yourself. Usually the reading is a bit of a shame, but I also understand at the end of the day the classes are quite short. But yeah, it would be like a bad point I wanted to mention. And then also not getting enough speaking practice in class. I find that we spend a lot of time going through the vocabulary and what each one means. We take the list and then we go, this one, what does this one mean? And then what I find it would be so much better if we had vocabulary lists with simple definition in Korean provided the week before, having to do homework in advance about these words, and then at the beginning of each class, as you correct the homework, ask which word you didn't really get, and then move on to have more time in the rest of your class, rather than just doing all of these definitions in Korean in class. Because as far as I'm concerned, anyway, I will 90% of the time check again what is the translation of this word anyway in English. It's a little bit of a loss of time, in my opinion, which could be put to better use. Moving on to the tips. We were just talking about it. The vocabulary. This is the one I've showed you before, right? So the part that under the dialogue, just learn this vocabulary in advance. What I do is just I go through them, I translate them to the best of my abilities, and then try to memorize them before the class. And yes, they do explain these words then again in the class, which you might find is a bit redundant, but actually it allows you to see if you understood or translated the word correctly. So it's more of a check and a bit of a revision, right? But during the rest of the class, you're actually going to be much more comfortable, especially in the reading and the listening, because these words are going to be used in it. And if you just found out what they mean like 2 seconds ago, you're not going to pick up on them. So it's better to always learn at least a week in advance of vocabulary. I could do a video about how I learn my vocabulary, so let me know in a comment if you're interested in such a video. I don't know. The other point would be to listen to the audio on repeat. So at the end, you have the CD with all of the audio, which are the dialogue in the audio your exercise. This week you go to chapter 3, you can continue to listen to chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4 to get a little bit into it before class. Keep on listening to it because actually it's the content that they want you to learn, content using the vocabulary and the grammar point that you're supposed to learn. You know, not just sitting here and like following necessarily like the dialogue as you read. You can do that a couple times, but just, you know, put it on and then do your dishes or something. The more as you listen to it, hearing the sound is actually going to be really good hearing practice, and hearing the structure and then trying to understand. And every time you're going to understand just a tiny little bit more, even though you feel like there's nothing at the beginning, it's gonna come. All right, just keep up with it. Third advice would be do your homework and do the readings even though they're not done in class, not just to practice but because actually some bits of them are actually in the exams, and if it's something you've looked up before, it helps. For the writing homework, often the teacher is going to give you like thing to write for next time, like a short text. It's always good to not just check your mistake when it's given back to you, but rewrite correctly what you should have written with the correction, and then study this text a bit. And the reason I'm saying that is because during the exam you're gonna have one of the topic of the 14 topics that you study. Usually it's a broad question, so you can kind of go whichever way you want, but like the topic is going to be one of them, like weather for example, or somewhere where you'd like to travel or something. And if you know already what you're going to talk about, if you have some structure in your head that are correct and that you already thought of before, it's really going to help you, because the main difficulty I personally had during the exam is not necessarily what we're supposed to do, but the short amount of time that we have to do it. And during the speaking exam, you should be keeping in mind that the teacher is trying to have you using the vocabulary and the grammar point learned in class, and usually together. Chapter 2, it's about weather. During the speaking exam, the teacher is going to ask you a question. If the topic is weather, they are kind of expecting you to use this exact vocabulary from this chapter as well as one of the 2 grammar points from that chapter. If you do this, best job. This is when you're gonna get all the marks. If you don't, just try to say anything that comes out. The worst during a speaking exam is to not speak, right? So try to do your best, but just keep in mind that you should use the content of the course as much as possible, even if it's not true. It really doesn't matter. You're not graded on the truth of what you say. All right, so there you have it. I hope the video was not too long and that you've learned something. If you have, or even if you haven't but you just enjoyed listening to it, please give me a thumbs up. If you would like to hear more about study tips or review of places I've studied, don't say it because I've studied there, give me a follow and then you'll be able to know when it comes out, if it ever does. It probably will. Come on. Right, I don't know how to finish this, so just bye bye. Let's get started. I feel so awkward. 2, which is level 2 and 3. What? No. What? No. Okay, let me restart on this. Nah. About 12 weeks. No, not at all. What am I saying? Now, why am I always looking down? The Sejong Institute? No, why did I say Sejong like that? Okay, let's restart this. Did you just find out I'm recording my video? Oh, first. Okay. It's gonna be fine.